Yes, ladies and gentlemen, thank you once again for joining us for this latest episode of Big Brother's Big Archive. My name's Karl, and joining me, as ever, is my co-host, Mr. Karl Dutton.
Yes, you've just got a bit of K squared here for doing this show. It's going to be fun. It's been a while since we've talked about these series, but in the retro ones, we've kind of got to the really old ones. The ones we'd have to watch through entirely to get them. You've been watching the international ones. I haven't as much anymore. There was a couple of years there where I was watching a lot of them, but I think now I just watch the UK show, and that's enough for me these days. So.
And as you mentioned there, it's been ages. It's about 6-7 months since we last recorded.
Yes, it has. Was it the Christmas special?
That would have been I think Celebrity 17.
Oh yeah, we did that one. Yep.
And I think it's fairly safe to say as well that since we recorded, the whole world's gone to pot as well. Obviously, we've left the European Union, new Prime Minister, new manager of the England team. You almost like to think that the whole world's been thrown into chaos because we haven't been recording.
I'd love to think that. Unfortunately, the whole world of it, a minuscule population are watching this show, and of that, a minuscule amount are listening to us. So probably not.
Well, we can dream, can't we?
Yes. Well.
Yeah. We're going to get ourselves back into reality, however. We are going to be talking about the latest series of Big Brother, which was Big Brother 17. Only 50 days long, so it is one of the shortest series in the entire Big Brother
It
community
is the
worldwide.
shortest series ever.
The shortest series ever. But short, but dare I say sweet. I really enjoyed this one.
Yeah, I'm with some of the characters that had gone. Although it could be argued that the reason they were gone is because of the sped up evictions, because they cancelled the last 2 weeks. But with the people we had left at the end, it might have dragged if they'd done the originally planned 2 other weeks. But as we said, it before we came on the air, it seemed like production did just wanted this show off the air and just so they could hurry up and get to the celebrities. Although, as we'll talk about with the cast, that line is every year just being blurred more and more as to, there's just no difference anymore, is there?
No, there isn't. I mean, you can be on Storage Wars UK and end up being a celebrity.
Yeah, and you can be this tabloid hound that is no less famous than anybody that's in the celebrity house right now and somehow be on the civilian show.
Well, that we'll be discussing that in a lot more detail, both in the next celebrity episode, which we'll do in about, I don't know, 5 years, and also in today's show. First off, we're
Well,
going
I
to
don't know. We're usually on time with this stuff. I think as long as we get the ones up to date of the ones that are coming out, it's we'll keep on it.
Yeah, that's what matters. Today, however, we are going to be talking about Big Brother 17, and we're going to be discussing first and foremost a couple of the pre-show stuffs before the series got onto air. Now, as you mentioned before, this was one of the shortest series ever, and one of the questions you have is, in a way, was this actually a good thing that the series was a bit shorter? Because we've been seeing in recent years how we've been expanding to like 13, 14-week series, and the impression some people get is maybe the series ends up dragging a little bit, and you end up getting a bit tired by the end of it.
Well, there was that's how it was before Channel 5. It's been getting shorter and shorter and shorter since Channel 5 took over. And this year they had it planned to be one of the shortest anyway. Just barely over 2 months, and then it went to under 2 months when they cut it. And I think it was the fact that not only was it already short, but then they cut it during the run that just kind of came across as, oh shit, the ratings are bad. Hurry up and get the quote unquote celebrities in there.
In a way, though, I quite like the fact that the series was a little bit shorter because sometimes it can be really exhausting, especially if you have an emotionally draining series like a Big Brother 15, for example. If you have a series which is a bit on the lighter side, as it were, that can work to the benefit of it. I never felt I was getting sick of anybody in the show, and I think that by the end of the series as well, all those sort of major storylines had all been wrapped up anyway. So
Yeah, I mean, it's not like we got a short shrift. It was still, 8 weeks or whatever it was, or 7 weeks or something like that. But at the same time, one of the things I used to love about the show in the olden days, show my age, was I loved the idea of the extended confinement and just seeing these people be isolated from the world, like they are anymore, I know, be isolated from the world and just see, them evolve and change and have this experience. And the less time it is, the less I don't know, it seems to be impacting, and the fact they've got this outside contact, it's not the same show. But it's one of those things of, as I was kind of alluding to a couple of years ago, I was more, got back once I got back into the show, around the time that it ended on the original run. I started getting really into it and watching all the other shows and watching the international ones and stuff. The last couple of years, I've more kind of backed off from the whole community and things. And nothing against the community out there, but obviously, if any of you listening, it's just, I just, yeah, I don't really, I enjoy watching the show, and I have opinions, which is why I come in this show. But for me, it's car crash television, and it's fun to have one thing in my life that's trash to watch, that's just kind of a brain dead thing to watch. Everything else that I am is all geeky, nerdy stuff, and then then when I tell them I watch this show, they're like, "Really?" Like it's just something that I say. It's just what I always explain to them. It's something I've watched since I was a kid, and then I it's just kind of out of habit. You have nostalgia for it, and then I watch it, but it is the most car crashy thing I watch, and I mean, it's always been trashy reality, but it's never been more trashy reality than now. But I just enjoy it for what it is, and I guess I have this fascination with I don't know, just from the social experiment aspect of it, it's disappointing to see it shortened. But from maybe the entertainment standpoint, it makes it better. I don't know. It's a mix of the two.
And you sort of touched on it as well. What was noticeable with the series was that, from the production perspective of it, there was this real disinterest from Channel 5 and this need to cut the series short to expand the celebrity version in the process. And one of the questions I have is, why do you think that was? Because if you speak to a lot of people on like the online community, places like Digital Spy, This is Big Brother, etc., they seem quite supportive about this series, and yet it's a contrast to how the casuals and the production team see it.
Well, I was encouraged because obviously, as I said, being out of the community, being off the forums, being off the stuff, I didn't really think about this show until 2 nights before it came on. And then I heard about the whole Two House thing, and I was like, "Oh, that's cool," and I was interested, and I tuned in, and they had the whole rebuilt set and the whole rebuilt house, and I was impressed. I was like, they've actually put some money into this. So it felt like, if you are going to put this amount of money into it, why aren't you interested? And I do feel like the utter self-destruction of the other house task lent to that, because that was supposed to be the gimmick for the first half of the series that kind of just failed. And I also think another part of it was the ratings just continue to drop and drop and drop. And I suppose the argument can be made now that there's now more of an argument for why there needs to be two celebrity series, because basically, especially since the celebrities and the civilians, the line has been blurred so much now, you're basically just getting two summer series for the price of one now. In the length of what we used to get the regular summer series back in the Channel 4 days, we're basically getting two series. So if you don't like one, you're probably going to like the other. So it can be seen as a benefit in some ways.
I mean, because if you look at some of the members of the cast, you had a Mistress of John Terry, which could very easily be considered a celebrity these days. We've also had MTV reality TV stars. So, as you mentioned before, those lines are really blurring.
I think Marco is the biggest one. I mean, obviously, a couple of years ago with that lady who was on Pop Idol or whatever. But I think, yeah, Marco Pierre White Jr. is a big one of like, come on, if they were scraping the barrel, less famous people than him have gone in the celebrity one, is what I'm saying.
He's more famous than Bobby Sable.
Yeah, that's exactly.
But let's be honest, way more famous than Bobby Sable.
Yeah, well.
So we'll move on to discuss launch night in a little bit more detail. Now, obviously, we touched on it in quite a bit just in our little monologue there. First off, the new set is absolutely amazing. I have to say, considering we've gone through 4 or 5 years of just Channel 5 using the exact same stage setup, very stale, very predictable, to have them completely overhauling the set was a real refreshing change in my opinion.
Absolutely. It looked great. I thought that the fact that you have the best of both worlds, you have the walk into the studio bit where they do the interview, but they now have the space and the layers of doors to shut out the crowd, so you can now get an inside interview without the crowd interference. Everything about it was great.
And if we turn our attention as well towards the cast, obviously we touched on certain members of those, Letitia, Jane, etc. One of the things that was really noticeable though was that this was statistically the oldest cast ever. The average age was 29 years old, which is even older than some of those in Big Brother 1, Big Brother 2, etc. And yet, if you looked at the actual cast members themselves, it didn't feel like an old series.
No, it didn't. There wasn't any old person. It was just that they went for more mid-30s rather than 20s. And also, my thing with the cast was, I don't think it's ever been more evident. It's been getting more and more and more over the last few years of every year. Channel 5, just the cast people become more, and the actually people who are brought in from the interviews have become less. And this year, I don't think there was a single person that was taken off the street.
But in a way, though, considering the quality of the series, maybe that worked to the benefit of it. And obviously,
But
when we have
that's my thing. Is it depends on how you see the series. If you watch the series to see real people and seeing a social experiment interaction, then you're not getting that. But if you're watching the show for just trashy reality entertainment, then it makes it better. It depends, and I am two minds of it because I originally liked the show when I was younger for the social aspect, and obviously the entertainment came with it. Whereas now, I complain about when they every single task is just an excuse to stir shit up, but at the same time it makes episodes entertaining. So it's it's like, yes, I know this is cheap, but also it works and it gets me watching. So mm, it's a kind of a conflict there.
So we'll turn our attentions towards week one. Now, the big twist concerning week one was the other house twist. Now, the key to this one was that 12 housemates entered the house on launch night, but they were completely unaware that there were 6 other housemates living in another house. Now, as you mentioned before, 2 houses have been something which have been speculated for a long time on the internet. People love the idea of 2 separate entities working against one another. Unfortunately, however, it didn't really turn out the way that many people thought it would.
2 days. I don't just go off on tangents about the cast thing just because it comes into bed. Obviously, it was a part of when we're talking about the cast. It also was for this reason. The reason why a casting thing, there's the integrity aspect, but there's also the aspect of when you cast people off the street, they will do anything they can to remain in that house. They are there for the experience, they're there to be famous, they're there for whatever. When you cast people who already have a taste of fame, then they don't care. And then it becomes the other way round, where production are bending over backwards and breaking every rule in the book just to keep them in the house because they're making the entertainment. Such is the case with Marco. And I think this was the greatest aspect of, well, you've got nobody to blame but yourselves. Marco ran out and Chelsea ran out. They saw the other house, and if this had been a series that still took the whole concept of, and if they were trying to keep the twist secret and keep everything working, and if they wanted to have this other house thing work, they would have never should have let them back in after seeing that other house. By letting them back in with the knowledge of the house and then them going to tell everybody, that's it, twist fucked. But because it's Marco and because he's bringing the entertainment, they can't throw him out because they're desperate for him because he's going to bring the viewers.
And plus, as well, when you bear in mind as well that Chelsea had links to Jane as well, who was in the other house, you can understand why the production team wanted to try and keep him around as well.
If this had been 10 years ago when they'd done this twist, and hell, they kind of did do a version of this twist 10 years ago, but if this was 10 years ago, they would have rejected them. They wouldn't have put them back in because they seen into the house and the twist would have been fucked. But instead, they put them back in. And then as soon as Margot said, "Oh yeah, I've seen Alex and he's in the house," he's like, "Well, game over. You just built an entire another house for nothing, and you've got nobody to blame but yourselves." No, this twist wasn't ruined by the house base. This twist wasn't ruined by anything. I mean, you can argue them running out the fire exit, which it's becoming more and more of a problem with these self-entitled housemates because they're cast. Again, it all leads back to this problem of if you cast people who have this self-entitled thing that they're already famous, they think they're above the show, and then they will do whatever they want, and you end up begging them to come back, and you'll do anything for them. And in this case, it completely fucked the twist, and they've got nobody to blame but themselves.
I do think that the twist maybe would have ended up petering out anyway, because the show's been around for 17 years. People are going to start getting suspicious about this sort of thing.
But they've
But the
never done
series,
anything like this before. Now, ideally, what we wanted when they say another house, ideally what we wanted was the Australia version, where there is two completely separate houses that don't know anything about each other, and then it's like, oh yeah, by the way, you're not the only house. That's Now they didn't have the money to do that. Obviously, they'd have to build an entire new big one and have it soundproofed, and it would they haven't got the money for that these days, so they did this kind of other house, kind of house next door type thing, which they did again 10 years ago, which could have worked just for the surprise factor, but some of the surprise factor, although they didn't see the ones that they were connected to in Chelsea's and Jason's case, the whole thing of the surprise that there was another house was completely ruined by this whole Marco running out and then coming back in with the knowledge thing.
Obviously, one of the big twists concerning the other house was that on the second or third day of it, Alex and Jackson were voted by the other housemates to what they believed to be evicted, but they were actually moved into the secret house, and then by a public vote, Ryan and Andrew went the other way. And they were told specifically, you can't tell anybody where you've come from, you have to keep this secret, and then Andrew immediately blows the cover and causes ructions.
He was, because he was half American or yeah, he was kind of half and half, wasn't he? You could tell that he came in with this idea of he wanted to be a kind of a Dr. Will type character. Trouble was, he wasn't that intelligent, so he was trying his best to look intelligent while at the same time completely screwing it up. But the big one that screwed it up was Ryan. Oh my lord. You could explain a sentence to Ryan and he would not be able to repeat it back to you because he wouldn't understand what you just said.
Ryan, by a long way, was my least favorite contestant on launch night. I just had this feeling that he was just going to be one of these absolutely unbearing people, very similar to a sort of Charlie Drummond type who needs the cameras on and needs to be seen as desperate.
It was the lips, it was the faces, it was the as soon as they just explained everything clearly to them, I don't understand. It's like, what is there to understand? If you had more than one brain cell, you would understand. But yeah, he completely messed it up by going in there and saying, "Oh yeah, I've seen everything that you've said." It's like, oh my good Jesus, what did they just say, both of you?
Do you think that's just Ryan though, knowing what works for television and wanting to create ructions because that's the sort of big dramatic thing that's going to make him remembered?
Well, that's what his storyline was, so he wanted to play into his storyline, which, as we saw, completely fizzled out after that first night. Now, it was kind of a cataclysm here. This was a great episode where this stuff all happened because I don't know whether it's just because they are self-entitled. Yeah, it's because they're self-entitled. Marco and Chelsea, oh my lord. So it basically became, these guys blew the cover and started shit as soon as they got in the door, at least Ryan did. Andrew then played the card of, you're all snakes and you're all turning on each other, which he thought was the smart card, but what he ended up doing was turning everybody against him. So it ended up being the whole house against them two, and Marco and Chelsea, as the self-entitled pricks that they are, became, well, they blew up and we saw what happened.
I have to say, one of my favourite side stories of the season was Chelsea's whole alpha male bravado thing, thinking he's the big bee's knees.
And you know, I don't like Ryan in general. I mean, I liked him half the time. Here's the thing: I liked the real Ryan, but I didn't like I am on stage Ryan.
Ryan's the television character.
Yeah, but you could just see he came in as that character, but then as soon as Marco and Chelsea became the dicks that they became, you saw it melt off his face and he went, "Oh shit, okay," because they got like properly aggressive. Like Marco was saying, he was going to punch security guards, and yep, you let him back in the house after he went out. But
Well, this is a show that rewarded Helen Wood, so
yeah.
But of course, this being Big Brother and this being Channel 5 Big Brother, to be honest, of course, the first week sees us having a couple of ejections and a couple of walkers. Now, first off, we're going to be talking about the quitter itself. Of course, there was, as there usually is, a set of twins in this year's house, Emma and Victoria. And Victoria, for whatever reason, she didn't feel overtly comfortable in there, decided to call it quits.
Yeah, I kind of get the feeling that Emma was the one who wanted to do it, and then
Yes.
she was kind of brought along with it because they wanted the twin gimmick. And I think this was, to be honest, the best thing for Emma because we got to know her as Emma and not the twins.
Because what can we really remember about Victoria? She liked trees.
And
Now,
she cried because she opened the fridge and it would look like a bloody massacre because she's not used to being around that and she's used to being around positive energy and yeah.
So I'm afraid to say, Victoria, maybe not one for the history books when it comes to Big Brother. And then almost immediately afterwards, Andrew ends up being ejected. Now, we sort of discussed this in the last couple of series, obviously with like Satila Tequila when she got kicked out of her celebrity version. It's this issue of things you say or do before going into the house, ending up coming back to haunt you and ended up getting you rejected.
What was it that actually got him ejected then? Was it this sex tape thing?
Officially, it was a sex tape thing, but I think there was some comments about homophobia which were out there. I think he maybe said some other dodgy things as well, but officially it was the bondage video.
Right, okay. It's just complete stupidity on both sides. It's his stupidity for not wiping his Twitter feed, before he went in, and it's their stupidity for not doing any research whatsoever, or if they did do research, thinking that nobody would care and dig that up, because God bless them, there are some fans that are very dedicated out there and will stalk these people and dig up anything. These people could work for political bloody parties, digging up dirt about people.
So there you go. The Big Brother community does have a positive trait.
Uh, if you call that a positive trait, sure. Well, they could be making something of their lives by getting real media jobs, but instead they're doing it about this show and these people. So take that for what it is.
And what did we think of Andrew on the whole? Obviously, he was only in there for 4 or 5 days. Obviously, he caused a lot of grief in terms of trying to play the big gameplay role. If he had stayed around a bit longer, what do you think he would have brought to the show?
It's the kind of American Big Brother player aspect that he was bringing to it, but at the same time, especially since he went into the main house, you kind of got the sense that he was in some sort of control in the other house. But as soon as he went into the main house, it was very clear that he did nothing. If they were given the secret task, Ryan basically said, "I'm not going to do it." So Andrew was like, "Okay, I'm not going to do it," and so he basically gave up, and he wasn't as smart as he thought he is.
The one big flaw I have about Andrew, though, and it's sort of something I touched on when I discussed Anton in Big Brother 12, it's this generation of contestants all trying to be the new Victor. And I felt Anton did that in Big Brother 12, and I get the feeling Andrew was trying to do that as well.
Yeah, but as I say, coming from America, maybe he was trying to be a Doctor Will. Maybe he was trying to be that game player who controls everybody. And it's like you're not, because you just don't have the intelligence or the social skills for that. Nobody with a social game would go in the house on the first night and say to everybody, "You're all backstabbing bastards." It's not how that works.
So, of course, whilst Andrew and Ryan are causing all their problems in the main house, in the other house as well, Natalie and Huey are having an argument. And this is really the first time we get to see Huey's angry side.
Yeah, I became undecided about this when it first started in this plus side of the house. I was like, "Oh my god, this guy is a nutcase. What the fuck?" He's like the worst kind of alcoholic where they get drunk and they stop punching people. Like he was that bad. Like how he just went from 1 to 50 over nothing, except it was without alcohol somehow. But then there was something in a later fight that I won't spoil what fight it was, but there was a fight later on where he was yelling and then like somebody grabbed him and turned him around and you could see his face to the camera and his face kind of dropped to being normal and then he started up again and turned back around and I was like, wait a minute, this is all an act.
I have to be honest, when I saw him the first time when he was doing that massive rant, that real first massive rant, online the day afterwards, and saying, to be honest, I quite like Huey, I found that really funny, and then finding hundreds of people agreeing with you. You never would have thought a character like Huey would have been that big unanimous fan favourite in the way that what he became.
I was baffled by it, to be honest. I early on I hated him when he was this. I just thought he was just a completely unpleasant person who just went from 0 to 15. I don't know. I can't. Even though I know it's a show and the entertainment thing, and sometimes I can put past that and just enjoy watching it. It's like I like to watch these people. There are some characters that get to the point of like I have to empathize with the people in there and what it would be like to live with that person, and he just got absolutely ridiculous over nothing. And early on, when he was in the other house, I did not like him at all. Later on, there was some sides of him that were kind of funny, but again, just the fact that it was an act. I My thing with the whole acting thing is I don't watch scripted reality for a reason. um, I tune into these reality shows to see real people. If I wanted to see somebody putting on an act, I'd watch a much better show than this.
I was more on the positive side with Huey. I did find the humour in his rants. I did find that side of him entertaining. I never would have rooted wanted to root for him to win based on the act. But I think
No.
as someone
I
who
mean, he contributed to the house. He was entertaining. His rants were sometimes funny, but his lariness of just going completely off the rails, it was more of a kind of, wow, either you are completely tapped, you've got some serious anger issues, or you're putting this completely on for the cameras, in which case I don't respect that. Like, that's my thing. That's my thing with it, is I don't tune into a reality show to watch actors, because there are much better scripted shows out there with much better actors.
yeah, why watch Big Brother when you can watch Borgin or Breaking Bad?
Exactly. That's it. For me, whereas I can see the entertainment side of it, but I don't like people who do everything for the magazine deals and for the cameras and things like that. And no matter how entertaining you're being, if that's not your true personality, my favourite entertainers are the characters like Jane, who were completely being unintentionally entertaining. That's my kind of Big Brother entertainment. I don't like the characters who, I like Nikki Graham. We've discussed this on that episode. I liked her pre-eviction. Post-eviction, Nikki Graham, I didn't like, because she was acting it, and you could tell that she was acting it.
And speaking of acting it, we go to Laura and Marco's showmance.
I don't know what this was. Was it acting? Was it for the papers? I don't know. I don't know whether it was. I don't know whether this is just him being him. We got to see some weird shit with the belt. This is what spoiled rich boy gets up to, and yeah, the whole thing with does he have a girlfriend, open relationship, it's not an open relationship. Here's the thing with this. She got all the blame, obviously, because she's a girl. But he did get kicked out, so maybe she didn't get all the blame. But my thing with it is there was no good guy in this entire that's my kind of take on a lot of this series. Is it was a, to use a terminology of something else that we watched, which I have a lot of time, it was a heel program. There was no faces here, there was no good guys, and they were all dicks, and it was just a what level of a dick you were being. Like, in almost all the arguments, it was like, yeah, he's being a total jerk, and I hate him for being a jerk, but the other guy isn't helping it. And this relationship was kind of the same way. It's like, yeah, he's dick for saying that he's got a girlfriend, not having a girlfriend, and the way he's being with her and how he treats women, but the way she jumped on him is not and even though she knew that, but then next morning she's like, oh, I don't know if I want to do this. It's like, oh, shut the hell up. If you want to do it, do it. I'm not going to judge. You can do whatever you want. It's your life. If you want to jump on, go ahead, but don't cry about it the next morning and say that you feel bad about it. So that was what my problem with Laura was early on. I actually ended up liking her later on after the whole Marco thing, but that was my problem with her early on, and obviously him for all the reasons of, but you know why? I can do what I want and I can push the cameraman, it's because I'm Marco P.O.I. Jr. Oh boy.
Do you think if Laura had been eligible to be nominated, do you think she would have gone that week?
Probably, just because of the women voters, but yeah, at least he got punished for it as well. But I do think that the crowd need to, and especially they need to let it go, because she actually became, later on after he left, she was one of the better people in there, to be honest.
I had a soft spot for Laura as well. I think the way that she grew over the course of the series, because nearly everything about her on paper should have been the archetypal first boot, in being a pretty attractive female who lured a man and ended up tainting him beyond all disrepair. That
Tainting.
sort of character nearly always goes first. So for Laura to survive that first eviction and then grow and develop into being a much better character was really refreshing to see.
See, that narrative is ridiculous, because he was the one who, basically said, I'm gonna have her, and she went up for it. Like, she, in a lot of ways, was the lesser of the two wrongs in that. Like I said, they were both in the wrong, but she was in less of the wrong. Like, he was saying he's in an open relationship, so she's like, okay, fair enough, fine. She wasn't doing anything wrong. Everything that was wrong was on his part, almost.
And of course, he ended up getting his comeuppance about it. Of course, that eviction took place, and it was Andy versus Emma versus Georgina versus Marco. And of course, it had been long established in the Big Brother community that a female had gone in the civilian series every single time. And finally, to paraphrase from The Undertaker, the streak is over.
Yeah, I love when you posted up the guy with the big googly eyes. Yeah. Not only that, but the actual first guy left was also a guy, so it's not even a technicality. Like, no, literally, both two first people to go were guys, other than the other twin. Look, it was the wrong decision for the series, to be honest. I mean, as much as I've ragged on him, as much as he was the complete scum of the earth and everything that's wrong with that generation, I'm like 5 years older. You know what I mean. Everything that's wrong about that type of person is in him. But at the same time, for the purpose of the show, he was a great bad guy, and I enjoyed watching him because he wasn't, other than maybe the night with Ryan, it wasn't a malicious. There wasn't really any malice in what he was doing. He was just a prick, and it was fun to watch that prick. So I think for the show, it was the wrong decision. I think, to be honest, Georgina might have been the better choice. We might have saved ourselves a lot of cringy television. But hey.
I think in a way though, if there was a male that had to go first, Marco in a lot of ways fit a lot of those characteristics because he's boastful, he's cocky, he believes that he can get his way with women. He's obviously he has his dad as well to back him, so he has that sort of delusion that comes with that. In a lot of ways, he was Caesar. He
Oh,
was
absolutely.
Caesar's downfall.
Absolutely. That's the thing, is I say in terms of the entertainment side of the show is a mistake, but in terms of if you're watching it and this is about moral justice, abso-fucking-lutely he was the person to go. I like that he got his comeuppance, that it wasn't just all put on Laura, because that's the typical Big Brother thing, is to put it all on the woman. And and the fact that if he had stayed, would he have become a kind of, oh god, what was his name? God, I hated him so much, but I can't even remember. I stopped watching the series because of him.
Stephen Good,
No, Perez Hilton. Yeah,
that's him.
it would have become that. Would he have become that kind of character where the production are basically bending over backwards to keep him in and keep him happy, or a John James type character? Would it have got to that level if he had stayed? Probably. So it's a 50-50 as to whether it would have been a good thing, whether he would have stayed or not. To be honest.
Personally, I'm more on the positive side of it. I think that a character like Marco has a real short shelf life. And I think that it's best to. We got 150% out of Marco as an entertainment personality.
Yeah, and at the same time, yeah, he probably would have ended up walking out because he didn't have his snort of coke eventually anyway, right?
So, of course, Marco ends up leaving the house. So, we're now officially on to week 2. And with the start of week 2, the others are revealed to the other house. Formally.
Yeah, you know that house that you saw the other two in? Oh, it's not just a bedsit again, promise, because goddamn, at least it wasn't that. But we've got some other people in there, and this was, even though the entire other house ruining thing was ruined, the whole that thing was whole, blah, 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 you know what I mean? That whole thing was, even though that whole thing was ruined, the moment of Jason was fantastic. There's obviously these conspiracy theorists out there as, oh, did he know? Did he not know? But I tell you, looking at that face, he did not know shit.
Some of Jason's facial reactions over the series were brilliant. That just look of absolute despair.
Yeah, just as soon as they said Charlie, he went, oh fuck. Like he looked as white as a ghost, and how he had like drop backwards and had to like sit down. That was brilliant. That was absolute gold. That was the twist paying off, at least on that level. That was the best thing that came from the other house twist. But then again, you could have done the same thing by just putting her in the house
I thought that,
straight. But yeah.
I thought there were a lot of moments from that reveal which I thought were very funny overall. Because I think that when Natalie revealed herself, I love everyone shouting up and saying, "That's my ex!"
Yeah.
And Jane, when she used her reveal and she went on this like 10-minute tirade about dementia.
She introduced herself like she was on the weakest link. Like she went, "Hi, I'm Jane. I'm 52." It's like literally it was the weakest link thing. Like, what are you doing? And I run this thing, but eventually, okay. And then Charlie, the entire narrative had been on the highlight show that she was going, "Oh, I'm going to go in there and give Jason what's for." She took a mask off. "Oh, take me back." Oh, lordy, lordy, lordy. No, that was a good night of TV, despite the other house twist being ruined. At least they didn't know who was in there, and that made this that much better.
And of course, what also became evident as well from the reveal of the others was there was pre-existing relationships in the house. Now, obviously, we touched on Jason and Charlie being the big obvious one, but we also had Sam and Ryan who had been in a relationship. Jane and Chelsea also had a thing about them as well. What were your opinions on the idea of pre-existing relationships being there? Obviously, Big Brother 8 have done this sort of twist in the past when he had the enemies twist with Dick and Danielle. Where do you personally stand?
I don't mind it. I think it works for the drama. I don't like it where it's something that's invented during the course of the show, like where they put what's her face's boyfriend in there in 2009, where it was just like, oh, well, you know what, stir it up if we brought.
Carly and Kenneth.
Yeah, when they put Kenneth in, that was completely fabricated and a desperate ratings ploy. But if it's actually built into the show and that's part of the show from the setup, it was compared to the US version, it was completely botched, of course, because this production team they could botch walking down the street, to be honest. But for what it was for our version, it was fun.
So, of course, the others are now finally into the house. Now, there was a 2 or 3 day worth of task where the two houses competed against each other. Nothing really to go into much detail about that. The next thing I really want to talk about, though, is something we sort of touched on in week 1, which was what I've quoted as Chelsea Big Bollocks.
And was this the week where he went off on one on Ryan, but then he quieted down again? But was this the week where he started arguing over pancakes and?
Yes, arguing over pancakes, going into the diary room saying he wants to quit, and nobody's going to
Yeah,
stand
that
up
was
to
it. He
him.
went to the diary room and said, "If you don't give me a bottle of wine, I'm gonna leave the show." You see what I mean? When a guy feels like he doesn't need the show, basically, yeah. And we'll get onto this when we get onto the punishments in quotation marks later. Oh Lord, that was if you've never seen why a cast show could never be the same as the old days, that was the moment when you see the punishments happen, because yeah.
What I loved about the whole Chelsea thing, though, was the complete and utter contempt that the production team had. Like, he was going on this big, long rant about who he was and what he did for a living, and Big Brother was just like, really?
At least they said that. At least they said that, because part of me was thinking that they would have actually gave in to his demands to keep him in. But at that point, I suppose he'd already proved that he wasn't much of a character anyway. So, maybe if this had been another person, maybe this had been Huey, it would have been different.
So we continue on with week 2. Also, there was a house flood, so the other house was utilized to an extent to house the other housemates when the house got flooded again. They have
This is
a
the second time it's happened.
second time this has happened. They have a terrible flooding problem with that house, you know.
Well, yeah, but June was ridiculous for rain in this country. For those who don't know, it got to a point where literally every river was overflowing, and we had about 2 weeks of sunshine in May, and then after that it just rained for all of June. So the only thing they could have done to avoid it, I suppose, is just build the house higher up. But then again, it was coming from the roof, so no. Maybe just make the roofs thicker. I don't know. Make them
But do
less.
something.
Yeah, you'd like to think in 6 years they've done something to the roofs to waterproof them after that first time, but nope.
This is Channel 5.
Yeah.
And the other thing that really stemmed as well from week 2 was Natalie's emergence as sort of the big villain of the series.
You know what? She was an interesting character. Of all the people in there, she was one of the most real, but because you could tell that her reactions were always really genuine and things like that, but it was really entertaining. The best rant, I think, of the entire series that wasn't related to Jane, although what about Jane, was Natalie going in the diary room, which she ranted for about 10 minutes about Jane, and literally the last line of the episode was, "Fuck off, Jane, and go make a cup of tea." She was I quite like Natalie. I don't like she did become a complete bitch, but she was entertaining, and I respected how natural and real her reactions were compared to some of the other people in there.
Do you think that Natalie was sort of hindered by who she was? Obviously, she had that sort of X-rated background, which I'm not going to really go into much detail about. Obviously, she had the status of being a black female and sort of the stigmas that maybe come with that with the audience. Do you think she was sort of dealt a poor hand in that regard?
Yeah, she was a very opinionated woman who wouldn't stand her ground when you're fighting up against Huey. Neither are going to give any ground because they both think they're in the right. But I will say, the conversation that first showed us this side of Natalie, holy crap, we didn't cover that conversation. The one where Jane was saying how she doesn't hate black people, but she hates some black people because her mum, the carer, was black and she mistreated us. Like, holy cow! Just don't even go into that conversation. Like, this kind of posh speaking British woman saying how she's got black servants. No, 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 no. Shut up.
Do you know what? Do you know what Natalie was to me? She was Pauline. That same sort of character type.
Yeah, yeah, she kind of was. Yeah, she was kind of no nonsense, but then sometimes she was no nonsense for no reason. But I'll be honest, in on the Huey arguments, they were both as bad as each other. But I think she was more in the right than Huey was most of the time because she would remain calm, but then snipe. And I do think, especially once they went into the main house, she became the complete bad guy because she was going around saying, "Oh, don't trust this guy, don't trust this guy." Yeah, definitely when they got into the main house, she was in the wrong. But early on, I was on her side in the other house.
I think a character like Natalie, though, has a very short shelf life. I think that someone like that could very easily get very tired if they stayed around for 4 or 5 weeks. I think someone like that needs to be out within the first two. So, and I think she served a purpose in that regard. I think
Yeah,
that yes, she caused arguments, she caused grief. Arguably, she ended up bringing out some of the first great moments of Jane, which for that I'm eternally grateful. But
yeah. Her rants about Jane and Jane's rants about her were some of the best moments in the house, in that other house early on. Yeah.
so it's no surprise that Natalie ends up getting evicted that week. We've sort of touched on it in detail, what we think of her as a person. So we're going to be moving on instead to week three. Now, this is really where the Charlie and Jason relationship starts to get really awkward. Obviously, there have been little nigglings between the two, little discussions. Week three, it's really evident the tensions which are evident there.
Yeah, by this point, it had become the clique versus the other side at this point, except the clique were the favourites in this series, which, whatever. Um, Early on, I did like, oh my god, why can't I even think of a name? The
Shows how
big,
much of an impact she
the
made.
big shock eviction.
Letitia.
Letitia, thank you. Yeah, early on I did like Letitia, but it was a combination of realizing she's been in another reality show, so she knows what to do to make people like her, and then how where she became kind of the pack leader. That's where I turned off from her and her whole clique.
The other big thing that really stemmed from week three as well was the BB Corpse task. Now, BB17 on the whole were quite weak in terms of shopping tasks this year. The Corpse task, though, was the one which really stuck in my mind.
This was the task team actually inventing a new task that hasn't been done in years, or at least was a new twist on a task that wasn't the fast forward task, that wasn't a bed sit. Holy crap, they came up with an original idea. It must have taken them 2 weeks. No, this was fun. The whole thing of how nobody gave a shit, and especially Ryan didn't give a shit, and then he ended up getting promoted for some reason, and then Chelsea was annoyed but he didn't do the work, which is what he was originally not doing. The whole listening to the nominations thing was fun though on the phone. That was I mean, the whole playing back nominations thing is an overplayed thing at this point.
It was an
But,
original way of doing it.
but it was an original way of doing it, especially since they had to keep a smile on their face. That was a quite a good task. I'll give it to them on that one.
It reminded me a lot of, if you remember it, of the PA task from Big Brother 7, I think it was. A very old school feel, I felt.
Let's get more of this, please. Rather than the let's do a task just so we can play you bitchy comments back at each other so you'll fight, which is what
Or, or, where,
the entire last half of the series was pretty much.
or where you have to freeze so they can introduce ex-housemates into the house to
We didn't
criticize,
get
etc.
that this year. Oh, in this one, I was stunned.
Maybe they're finally learning.
Or maybe the last 2 weeks got cut off, so then some of the tasks they were going to do got cut off. Maybe we were going to get a bed sit for the last 2 weeks.
Yes, no bed sit this year.
No,
Well, technically we had the other house, and that's just a massive
yeah,
mess.
yeah, yeah, it is. But at least it wasn't another. Oh, they're fake evicted. Yeah. Although they did do that with Alex and I suppose they did, didn't they?
Yeah, they haven't learned it all really.
No.
Mental Note Channel 5, more tasks like the BB Corps task, and less stuff like the Georgina and Jackson romance.
That wasn't them though, was it? That was just that I didn't ever get a kind of publicity vibe from that relationship. I suppose we'll talk about it later. It becomes much more of a storyline for the next couple of weeks, doesn't it?
Well, can we really talk about it later? Because, of course, this was the week that Georgina got
Oh
evicted.
right, okay. This was the big. Okay, right. I didn't realize we're there yet. This, I tell you, this show was short. Um, yeah, this whole relationship, it none of it felt fake to me or showmancy to me, just because of how realistic it was in a horrible, horrible way. Uh, Jackson was utterly ridiculous with his overreactions and his crying. Holy cow! Is Jackson related to the Flair family? Tears at the drop of a hat. But Georgina was that possessive, horrible girlfriend who is nice to you every once in a while, so you keep crawling back to her, but then she's a bitch for the rest of the week. Yep, had that one.
There was some really strange and slightly vulgar stuff as well, which were going on there. I mean, asking her about it, Georgina asking Jackson about his ex's placenta.
No, they were talking about it, and because he brought up something about the birth, she got upset. Like, or when she said outright in a conversation to somebody else, if I'd known about his son, I wouldn't have got with him. Ah, wow.
And you have to remember as well, Georgina was quite highly regarded as well. A lot of people on the forums quite liked her, and just it completely collapsed in the space of 3 weeks.
Yeah, because she went from being just the moany woman to being the moany ex-girlfriend, and yeah, the women won't like that because either they see too much of themselves in it. That's not a sexist comment, or they see just a nasty woman that they didn't like, and they like Jackson because he's a good-looking guy, which is most of it. See, let's be honest, is, I want to be with him, but she's with him, but she's mistreating him. So I'll be fair and say it was that side of it. And obviously for the guys, it's like, oh dear, yeah, I know that kind of relationship, definitely, definitely. But she was just a bitch in every way. He was a wet fucking mop, and he deserved everything he got. Like I had sympathy for him to a point, but then he brought it on himself, especially, and then just later on, where he got to the point of, oh, will you marry me? Oh, Jesus.
The one positive I will say about Georgina, though, is her face when she gets evicted, and Jackson just bursting into tears at the drop of a hat because of it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And now she just kind of went, oh shit, I do like you, Jackson. I'm sorry, I love you. It was a great dramatic moment of just overplayed, just over dramatic stuff. But the thing is I believed it. I don't think any of this was an act. I think this was just a guy who is not quite as in touch with his emotions as he thinks he is, and a woman who has some issues she needs to sort out.
And of course, she ended up sorting them out outside of the house. Of course, she ended up getting evicted that week. It was Andy versus Evelyn versus Georgina versus Jane. Andy was up quite a couple of times in those first couple of weeks, wasn't he? I mean, we haven't really discussed him in a lot more
Yeah,
depth,
he was
but
obviously the targeted one because of his condescending nature. He was the unpopular one of the house until it switched to being Jason after this.
and I mean, I quite liked Andy during those early weeks. Obviously, I have a bit of a preference towards the more intelligent housemates. I understand there was a lot of flaws about him, and he could come across as very condescending. But I've always liked those sort of Chris Wright type figures, which are they're good house narrators, and I think Andy served that purpose quite well.
Mm. I liked him to a point. I did enjoy. I did sympathise for him when the house turned against him. I did empathize with him of being in a house of a complete self-possessed morons. He fucking was. So yeah, I totally get him on all that stuff. But there was, I don't know, every time I'd start to like him, he'd do something that made me go, oh God, really? Like, it was a case of you bringing it on yourself. Just like with Jason later, it's a case of, yes, people are being so overreactionary about it and being just jerks about it, but you did it to yourself by starting it with some of the things that not necessarily what he said in all the cases, but how he said it. If you're in a group talking about ghost stories, just just roll your eyes or whatever you're gonna
Just
do,
go along with it.
or just go in the diary room and say it. Don't be the jerk who spikes up and says, "Oh well, ghosts aren't real." It's like I know you're probably thinking that. We all probably would have said something like that in that conversation, but you don't say it because you just know to keep your mouth shut because it's going to cause shit. You know what I mean?
I do, yes. And we got another example of those sort of bad points of Andy during the shopping task in week 4, which was the loyalty points. Because if anybody didn't know about this task, the idea was that the house was given loyalty points, which they were allowed to spend on whatever they wanted. And of course, there were temptations and twists and teasers throughout the week, and everybody got one inside of the house. And the big one, which happened in terms of Andy, was that 3 of the housemates, including himself, were given the opportunity to see their boyfriends, and they were allowed to stay in the house for a little bit. And as much as I do lean on the positive side of Andy in regards to the show, this was one of his bad moments for me. His behaviour around Ed.
I liked the engagement thing was fun. It was very over the top and showy, but it was a nice moment, and I liked how the house dropped all their bullshit because they maligned him for so many weeks. Then they dropped all that and were just happy for him. That was good. That was nice.
Yes.
The first night, I mean, obviously in my head I'm going, oh, outside contact, here we go. Then the old show is completely. I think though at this point, I say it to myself in my head, but I'm so past it because the outside contact and the original concept of the show is so dead at this point that you're just like par for the chorus. So I was like, okay, one night it makes it a little something different for one night. It was the next night one
Yes.
that got people going, and it wasn't necessarily him who did it. It was Emma, which I understand to a point. But then when we hear about what happened when she left the house, maybe not. We don't understand it so much.
Because of course the big irony that came from this is that obviously we have the first ever Big Brother UK engagement with Ed proposing to Andy, and of course he ended up calling it off between the two. Obviously, I'm not going to get into much details about exactly what happened because of legal issues regarding the show, but
Legal issues? Why is the legal issues?
well, I'd like to believe that people, hundreds of thousands of people listening to Big Archive and hanging on our every word.
Oh, look, as from what I've heard, there was this whole thing where he was kind of maybe cheating on him. It was all rumor as far as I knew. I didn't know it had been confirmed. I didn't know it had been called off. But that's
It
not
has
some.
been confirmed that they've broken off the relationship.
Yeah, because there was this whole thing about how didn't he leave at like 3 a.m. at one point, and we were like, wait, why is he leaving at 3 a.m.? And then he came back in the morning, so that was weird. I don't know what the explanation to Andy or Big Brother was, but yeah, there was definitely something going on there. Um, was it for the show? I don't know. It does seem like Ed was cheating on him. I think that's what the whole thing was, right?
That's the impression. That's the rumors that go around on the forums.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it could be right, it could be wrong. Cover our ass from legal ramifications by saying it's just slander. It could just be slander, but it could just be rumors. But that's as far as we know is the case. But yeah, I kind of got that impression.
And we'll move on to Emma, of course. Now, Emma had sort of been left without a story because of obviously what happened to Victoria. She ended up leaving the house. And then this week, she ends up being ejected for once again trying to break out. Now, when you consider what Marco and Chelsea have been doing throughout the series and what housemates over the course of the years have been done, do you think this was quite harsh on Emma to be ejected?
No, and I'll tell you why. Because it was the second time. Every other person that broke out did it once, and at this point, everybody was doing it. That day, I think at least 3 people did it. And it was getting to the point on the last few series, but especially this series. The last few celebrity ones has been the same, but this series was probably the worst for it. Every time there was an argument and somebody felt bad, they were out the fire exit. And it was getting to that point where they needed to fucking make an example. So it's a combination of they needed to make an example, and it was the second time. Everybody else had gone through once. This was the second time that she'd done it. You got a warning the first time, second time, no more warning. You want out so bad, go. And she wasn't that much of a loss to the show anyway. She had a storyline with Georgina at one point, and then apparently she went off on a sex holiday with Marco. So
Is that a trade up
okay.
or a trade down?
I look, if she wants to be one of 10,000, more about her.
So yeah, Emma wasn't really that much of a loss to the show. One person that maybe was a big loss to the show happened a couple of days later. Of course, the eviction took place, and it was Chelsea versus Charlie versus Jason. Finally, we're going to get that culmination of the Charlie and Jason relationship saga, and it's Charlie, being the female, who ends up being evicted.
I do say the one thing I will say about this series, and this worked out quite naturally, was we'd have the peak of the storyline, and then the person would go. We had the peak of the Georgina Jackson thing. Georgina went. We had the peak of the Charlie Jason storyline. And just when we were getting bored of it, she went. So we never had time to. I mean, Georgina and Jackson, we did get bored of it after again, but it didn't. Nothing dragged on, probably because of the shortness of the series. But the people, they went when they were just starting to become a problem, and this was becoming a problem. Yeah, this whole relationship was toxic in every way to both of them. She was obsessed with getting him back. Again, as I said about other arguments and other relationships earlier in the house, there was no good guy in this scenario. I felt for him in some aspects, just from being a guy. I did feel for him because she did start things over nothing and be possessive and be kind of manipulative at times, but at the same time, he was a bit of a cold dick sometimes. So, yeah, and some of the things she said that he said and he said, she said, we don't know the whole thing of their relationship. It just became very toxic to them and everybody else in the house. I think individually they were fine. Jason obviously had his problems later, but I think Charlie could have been a nice housemate on her own. But with him, she just became a bit of a whining banshee who had a one-note storyline of trying to get him back, and then when he shunned her, she started saying all these untrue allegations about him because she wanted to get him back for shunning her, basically.
I never really got the idea of why Charlie was so popular in the show. I mean, obviously she brought a lot to it. Obviously the stuff with Jason, which we've just discussed there. But there almost seems to be this universal adoration, especially places like Survivor Sucks, who absolutely adore Charlie, consider her one of the greatest housemates of the last 5 years. She was just a cow though for me. And I hate to say that. If she's listening, I apologise, but I just didn't find her that pleasant of a person. And aside from obviously the stuff with Jason, that was it for her. That was the one and only thing she brought to the show, was that story.
Well,
And without that,
my thing was I liked her personality on her own, but I didn't like the person she was with Jason.
in a way, and I'm maybe being a bit convoluted here, it was sort of a bit like Linda Nolan, where we had Linda, who perfectly fine, pleasant person on her own, but got so caught up in this storyline of Jim Davidson that it ended up tainting everything else about her. And I think Charlie's very similar to that.
Yeah, and when you start saying totally untrue things about Jason cheating just because he went out on a night out that he didn't tell you about, when you may or may not have been split up, at that point you're crossing into Buddy Boiler territory, you know?
Did you consider Charlie a big loss to the show at that point?
No, because it was becoming played out at that point. Jason, she would try and make up with Jason. Jason would be cold to her. She'd go and cry. They'd have an argument, and then he'd storm around and she'd cry some more.
If Jason hadn't have been there, how do you think Charlie would have handled the house? What sort of character do you think she maybe could have been?
She reminded me of a lot of Ashley. She could have been a kind of older Ashley, I think.
Of course, Charlie ends up being evicted, and we're now on to week 5. Now, one of the things we've got to talk about in regards to week 5 is Huey and Ryan as a showman. Now, this has sort of been bubbling up during the last couple of weeks, and by week 5, it becomes very evident that these two are more than just friends, whether that's for the camera reasons or whatever. What did you make of that?
Look, here's the thing. I myself am bisexual, so I have a dog in both races, as people would say. So I like that we got a full on genuine gay relationship in the house. That was nice. It was a shame it was with these two, because that's my thing. Is I obviously just by what I am, who I am, I have no problem with a gay relationship or any of that stuff. But I liked them two together as a genuine couple. My problem with them was their facade, their characters, their I'm on stage and now I'm going to act, and I just don't like those kind of characters, and that's why the guys like the Perez Hiltons or that guy, they just completely turn me off, because those people who so badly want to be the American diva but do it so badly, I just can't stand.
I think there was maybe a bit more of a mellow side to Huey. I think he maybe came off a bit better in the relationship than what Ryan did.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Ryan was more a bit full on, wasn't he? Absolutely. Yeah. Again, the quieter moments I liked them, but when they became the Larry, Ryan became the purse my duck lips. Rylan too, and when Huey became the I'm arguing and getting airtime, I just no thanks.
And that was one of the side stories of the big story that happened in week 5, and this is Annihilation Week. Now, I've been on the Big Brother community for a long time. I've followed loads of twists, loads of ideas and plot devices, etc. I don't think I've ever seen one which, in anticipation, was more badly received than Annihilation Week. Because the idea was that they were just going to be claiming out 4 or 5 housemates over the course of the week. No idea how, no idea who it's going to be. And there was a lot of people out there who were really, really worried how this was going to turn out.
Yeah, this was the obvious. Oh shit, we've put a lot of housemates in and then we've cut 2 weeks. Oh, well, time to chuck them all out. And then this entire thing, while it gave us some great moments, while it gave us some entertainment, and while actually it made me think, wow, maybe a UK version of the American series could work, because the whole game playing aspect really gave a new thing to the show, and that was fun and all. I quite enjoyed the strategizing and the paranoia and that kind of thing, but it did just reek of, oh shit, gotta get to the end, chuck them all out, we've got to get the celebrities in.
But as we would find out during the course of the week, it ended up being arguably one of the best weeks of the show.
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah.
Do you like the idea of the American version of the show being embraced? People looking at strategy and trying to evict without trying to people please and play up to the public.
At this point, yes. If it had been, if the series was still what it was, if it was still the social experiment popularity contest that it was, I would say no. But it's become such a warped version of it where everybody's so savvy and everybody knows what they have to do to to become the popular one, and everybody is competing to be the next Nikki Graham, the next Rylan, the next whatever. Then yeah, we may as well go full born social experiment game playing version, because at that point at least you're getting that side of it and you're not just getting a bunch of trashy people trying to show up and get airtime.
Because this is something that Channel 5 in particular have really wanted to try and do for a long time. Obviously, remember they were allowed to discuss nominations in Big Brother 13, and obviously that got rescinded after 2 weeks. I get the feeling that Channel 4, or Channel 5 I should say, have really wanted to try and embrace that American side to it. They've sort of eked it in a little bit subtly, and I think this is another step towards that.
I think it's eventually going to get to a point where every version is going to be a homogenized version. I think the Canadian version is probably add a bit more drawn out scenes and more of the Big Brother authority voice from our version into Big Brother Canada, and I think that's where the show's going to end up going.
And the Canadian version's been amazing these last couple of years.
So yeah, it would be interesting. I would like to see a full series of it, and then we could decide whether we liked that or our version better.
I agree. I totally and utterly agree. But of course, Annihilation Week ends up getting underway, and the first part of it is that the House is going to decide between them for one of them who they want to evict. Now, they're very clear about this. You can't just stand up and say, evict me, please yourselves. It has to be somebody who wants to be there, which I thought was very convoluted on the part of production. So the House vote ends up taking place, and it's no surprise, really, it ends up being Chelsea who ends up going.
Yeah, on a popularity vote, because at that point Andy and Jason had both been able to. Well, Jason hadn't become unpopular at that point, but Andy especially had been able to turn it round. Um, so Yeah, it was no surprise. Arguably, there was a thought of maybe it would have been Jane. There were several times where if people thought it was going to be Jane, it wasn't Jane. Um, but yeah, I mean, I I felt bad for the people who went that they didn't get the whole full eviction experience, but at the same time, it made for great television.
It certainly did. And I think as well, in terms of the people that were realistically going to go in that vote, I think that Chelsea was the best choice as well, because as much as he had all that bravado and all that show about him, I started to think he'd maybe run his course a little bit. We'd had
Yeah,
we'd had the big bollock stuff, we've had the rants, we'd had the demands, and you were just left with a grumpy middle-aged man.
yeah, and at that point, he had become a bit too full of himself, as we talked about earlier. So yeah, definitely.
I think a character like Chelsea is somebody who needs to stay outside of power. I think that if he was within the main clique of the group and was exuding some sort of confidence and bravado of I am running the house, he would be absolutely unbearable. But
Yeah,
as it
definitely.
was, where he was essentially this outsider, this figure of ridicule from both the production team and the other housemates, he served his purpose.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and this whole thing of I'm a billionaire, so I don't need this show. It's like, well, why are you on it then?
Exactly. And how nearly all of his stories ended up unraveling anyway in the papers.
Yeah, exactly. If
There
you
does
if
seem to be this need, though, in the Channel 5 era of the show to create another Dexter Core. How many characters have we had who've had the sort of I'm Flash, I'm Bravado, I
But
live in the
that's
spotlight?
every cast now. Is everybody's trying to be a previous version that people liked?
I think maybe it stands out for me more, though, because Dexter's maybe one of the more modern versions of that. We've all
Mm,
seen the Nickies and the Victors that were very old school. Dexter's probably one of the newer archetypes that people are trying to recreate.
yeah, definitely, definitely. And he took it to the one step further by inventing that he was this philanthropist. You know what I mean? I can't say the word. He's some sort of billionaire.
And I have to say, though, considering there's been some sort of inklings between him and Jane throughout the time, and he'd really pushed for Jane to go, I felt it was quite comic that Jane ended up surviving him.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. But at that point, she didn't bring. She brought more towards the end, but in the early stages, she wouldn't do anything for a week, and then have this amazing diary entry, and that would kind of keep her in people's favourites side. You know,
I think people had always had a soft spot for Jane, but I don't think they've ever.
it was only when she did the only time I ever really enjoyed it was when she had a rant. Towards the end, she started to become more fun, but when she was just miserable and wanted to run out the door every 5 minutes, I was like, fine, go.
And we're going to move on instead to the big moment of the series. Now, this is, dare I say, if people are going to be talking about Big Brother 17 in a couple of years' time, I think this is the moment that they're going to remember. The housemates end up being brought into a task room. They've all got buzzers in front of them, and they get told, here is 20 grand. You press that button first, you get that 20 grand. But as a catch, you have to evict automatically one of your other housemates. Now, the build up to this was that the majority of the house wanted Jason gone. I think it was pretty much Jason, Andy, and maybe one other person were okay with Jason, but of course the rest of the house would have got rid of him like that.
Well, he wasn't against them at that point, but he wasn't in the clique.
Oh, certainly not. But of course they end up doing it. Your time starts now. They all hit the buzzer. Jason ends up winning. 20 grand in his pocket, and now he has to evict someone. And this is the moment where this is Big Brother implodes, and Digital Spy ends up being absolutely jubilant. He evicts Letitia.
This was the turning point of the series, and this moment right here was the argument for doing an American style series, because you get the effect of the American style show, but it's new to the British contestants. They don't. There's none of that. Oh well, it's just a game. Fair enough. Shake hands, kind of thing. Because the American versions are used to it. There was this. Oh my god, what have you done? It was amazing. They of course became a rabid mob, and it's not fair, and she should have won for a kid, and all this kind of stuff. Um,
The kid that she left to go on the show.
yes, which is a whole other argument. I suppose you could have the argument of she needed the money or whatever, but nobody should be handed anything in there for going on the show just because they deserved it. They were the rightful winner because they needed the money. No, they should be handed the winner because they gave the most of the show. And she was pretty much tipped as the winner, not only by production but fans
I think the
and the
bookmakers had her as
housemates.
favourite to win.
Yeah, because she was a likable person, but when she went so over the top on Andy is when I turned off on her. Because yes, he was being patronising in that conversation, but how she went completely against him and turned the entire house against him, saying he was a game player just because he said that she was a bit of a bitch, and that she could bitch about people, which was true. That was when I turned off from Letitia, and yeah, this was a good moment for me.
And it was the perfect person for it to happen to as well. Obviously, being the big fan favourite, being the leader of that clique. And I think that if it had been anybody else, I don't think the impact would have been there. But of course,
Her or Jackson. They were the
her or
only,
Jackson, it
yeah.
needs to be someone like that, someone who, or an Alex even, because Alex was very popular with that clique as well.
Yeah, but Alex wouldn't have actually affected the show that much. like, yeah,
Uh,
like Letitia or Jackson were the ones that would be that impact, but also make the show better.
yeah. And this is our opportunity to talk about Letitia because depending on where you read or who you speak to, etc., it's a real division about what people think of her. I think there's a lot of people that are really quite supportive of her, think that she's quite likable, quite entertaining, and there's other people that, in their eyes, she's like spawn of Satan. Personally, if I had to go between the two, I thought she was okay. I think, yeah, maybe there was a lot of those diva habits which I didn't like, and I didn't like that she controlled what was the villain side of the house in my eyes. But she wasn't terrible.
No, she was a reality star who knew what she was doing,
Exactly.
definitely. But she was a nice enough person. There was that click side of her. She did turn the house against Andy, but other than that, she was generally quite a likable person. I just am tired of seeing that archetype win the show.
And I think that was one of the things that really nagged a lot of people on Digital Spy was that Letitia had this reality TV experience. She was doing it essentially as a job
Mm.
rather than because she wanted to do Big Brother itself.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. She did. This was just another one of her rounds of reality shows to do, and but the difference is you only really get big money out of this if you win, and this stopped that.
Mind you, though, if you had to look at post-show success in inverted commas as well, you can't go past Letitia because she ended up appearing on bit on the side and in a moment which went viral. I mean, I saw this on places like Reddit. I saw people in China tweeting about it, people in Japan, etc. Of course, she ends up twerking in a very, very tight dress, and during the middle of it, a dress ends up imploding and her bum's on show for the rest of the world.
Oh my lord! Yeah, this is one of those things that's going to turn up in the try not to laugh
Yes.
vines, isn't it? Yeah,
I mean, it was on the front page of Reddit.
yeah. This was ridiculous. This was look at me, look how entertaining I am. This wannabe doing something for attention, and then it completely backfiring. It was just amazing in every respect.
Moment of the year, perhaps?
Yeah, probably
Yeah.
that. But her eviction, all that.
Personally, I'm still going to vote for David is dead.
It's not as funny now, though, is it?
Mm. One thing that was quite funny, however, was the reaction to Letitia being evicted and a lot of the hypocrisy of a lot of the characters in regards to it. I mean, Jackson in particular did not come across very well at all.
Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. Especially with the task the next day.
Exactly.
With him, I would never take money from the prize fund. I would have shared it out with all of you. Next day, takes money from the prize fund.
And I love
Him,
James.
and Alex were just complete. From that point, they were on. Both of them. Not maybe not Alex because he didn't do enough, but Jackson especially was on track to win the show. That was the moment where he had lost the show for himself, and he knew it because he went to the diary room and said that exact thing almost.
Exactly. I have to say, I love Jane's reaction afterwards, where she said, "Is he going to split that 10 ways?" Or something along those lines.
No, bet not.
So, of course, Letitia ends up being evicted. We've already discussed her in a bit more detail. And then we come to the final part of the vote. Now, the entire house, bar Andy, is now up in a vote to save. The three people with the bottom three votes in the public vote would end up being going against each other, and the house would vote for the person they want to leave between those three. And it ends up being Laura, Sam, and Ryan, who end up being the bottom three. A lot of people expecting, of course, Laura being a female up against two moderately attractive males, would of course be the one who ended up going. And of course, once again, it turned into another fantastic moment.
Yes, it did. Yes, it did.
Yep. And once again, it's Jason who's at the centre of it.
Yeah, because all of a sudden, Ryan's vulgar. He's terrible to women. And it was like, what? Where's this come from? And then production were nice enough the next day to edit in one of the conversations that he was talking about. You were like, okay, I could kind of see that, but I could see what some of the other aspects were saying with Jason, where he would take note of something and then not say anything about it, but then bring it up, and he become, the more on the moral high ground when the nominations came. I do see that side of it.
Yes.
As much as I do, had problems with Ryan and Huey's overreactions to stuff, I think this was justified because there was a sense of where did that come from, Jason?
I think that Ryan's behaviour, though, on the whole, during that whole vote reveal, I think that maybe Ryan had maybe started to sort of improve a little bit over the last couple of weeks. And his reaction to people voting him out, and especially the fact he was wearing a bin liner whilst it was happening as well, it sort of reminded me why I hated Ryan in the first place, to be honest.
At first, his reaction, I respected that he took it so well. But then, of course, he was like, oh, Jason, you're a prick, and whatever. I mean, it could have been a lot worse. The bin liner thing, though, what the hell?
That was just Ryan being Ryan, wasn't it?
That was him going, oh, everybody will remember me. No, they won't.
Who was he again?
I don't know. The other guy who was with the guy who should have won.
Yeah, Ryan is a character archetype I have never liked whatsoever. I've always spoken about my dislike for people like Charlie Drummond, for example. He was very much on that sort of wavelength as well. Very showy, very camera aware, but still trying to paint this idea of, oh, look at me, I'm still perfect, I'm still nice, and I'm still being fun and wacky and zany. And it's just like, it's desperate, it's not funny, we know about your reality TV background, stop it.
He was, if Mark from last series and Ryland had a love child, they're all the same type of character. They're on some level, they're nice guys, but then they just have to be those people.
The one thing that always stuck in my mind, though, on a sort of a funny note in regards to Ryan, is someone mentioned this before on one of the forums. Have you ever seen Mary Poppins? You know the little boy in Mary Poppins?
Yeah.
He looked exactly like that.
Who did, Ryan?
Yes.
I don't know.
Honestly, look it up. He looks exactly the same as him.
I was thinking more Leslie Ash, personally, but...
With the pouty lips.
Yep.
This gives us a good chance, though, to really talk about Annihilation Week, because considering the pessimism that went into this week, it turned...
Well, you know why the pessimism went into this week was because every time it's like, oh, apocalypse week, and it lasts a day. It never. These twists are always awful rating stunts.
I think it's reminding people as well of the likes of 4-Out 4-In and the quadruple eviction as well. People just expected Letitia's clique in particular to just dominate and just cut off the Andys, the Janes, and the Jasons, the ones which are really popular with the likes of Digital Spy.
Yeah, definitely. When was the week where they were all punished and put into they had basic food, and then the poor people ate from the rich people's side, and then they were put into sacks? What was that this week?
That was the week. That was when Jackson and Alex ended up going into the luxury, wasn't it?
Yes, because I do want to speak about that, because that was the moment I was speaking about earlier, where that was the most evident. Yeah, we can't punish these people because we still want to show. Just so desperate moment of they're never going to treat these housemates that bad anymore because they don't want them to leave. The whole thing of, right, we're putting you in sacks and you're not eating because you did this, and we've cleared all the cupboards. Right, 2 ad breaks later, the punishment has been lifted. Well, what the you went through the trouble of clearing the cupboards and putting sacks on them for about 2 hours? And there was this whole drama about it, and Andrew was pissed off because he was in this fucking sack, and it was for like 2 hours. What was it even worth the effort of punishing them? Oh my god, they missed 1 meal, and the actual ration thing lasted maybe a day. Oh my god, they had it hard in there. They did. Jesus Christ, this was just so evident of why even bother if you're not going to do it, and then 2, it's just putting on a show as if you're punishing them, but you're actually not, because you know that if you actually treat any of these bad, they just walk out because you're desperate for these people to stay on your show because you're a desperate show at this point.
It's like a workhouse in there. I don't know what to say.
Yeah.
But this does give us an opportunity to talk about Jane. Now, we've mentioned before in little tidbits, etc., of some of the great funny Jane moments. And this is really where Jane stopped being a guilty pleasure housemate for a lot of the fan base and became a full-on favourite.
Yeah, absolutely. Once Chelsea left, I started liking her a hell of a lot more, because before she was in a shell and she'd occasionally have these great moments of rants or things in the diary room, and she was great in those moments, but it was kind of like a Rain Man type deal. It was like she was in a sedentary state half the time, but then occasionally she'd have these great moments. But then she constantly kept delivering and being quite, a likable character for that point, and adding to entertainment factor. So yeah, I really started liking Jane towards the end.
I think the key thing was she relaxed. Obviously, once
Absolutely.
Chelsea wasn't there, she
Yeah.
could just start being herself a little bit more. And I know a lot of people compare it to Nikki Graham and say that, oh, she was doing it false because she knew how popular Nikki was. I never got that impression. I just felt that was the way Jane was.
Yeah, I never thought it was put on. She was just kind of like Nikki's mum, basically.
And of course, it ends up culminating itself when Jane ends up being saved in the save and replace task. She is one of 4 people who's nominated that week. It's Jackson, Jason, Laura, and herself. Sam wins the save and replace competition and chooses to save her.
Yeah, Sam, that's a name we haven't brought up yet. There's
Yes,
only
it's probably the only significant moment that Sam had.
Yeah, tell me about it.
We have to move on to a bit of a serious note, though, because I hate to say it, there was a murder attempt which took place in that house. Of course,
What?
yes, there was. Of course, there was a task which ended up taking place. They were split into teams, which included Jason, Jane, and Sam making up the green team, Alex, Laura, and Chewie on the red team, Andy, Evelyn, and Jackson on the blue team. They had to build a bridge over the pool with materials provided, and one team member stand in it for 90 seconds, whilst the others threw water balloons and sponges to try to throw them off. And I hate to say it, ladies and gentlemen, but Jackson attempted to kill Jane.
I missed this episode. This is one of the ones that I taped, but then I had 2 stacked up, and the next one was an eviction. So I was like, "Oh, nothing will have happened on that episode." And it turns out it was this. It was this one. So I ended up having to go back and watch the clip. Um, the way it was built up sounded much more impressive as it was when I finally watched it, but it was a pretty scary moment that she was completely KO'd. From being hit in the throat. But yeah, crazy. When you said a murder attempt, I thought there was something that had happened that production had cut, because it wouldn't surprise me.
No, it was just me being just exaggerating for the sake of entertainment.
Okay.
Yeah, much like how Jane did. Because I do think there was a lot of people. I mean, Twitter urged on the negative side of it, felt that Jane's hamming it up and that's god awful, and how can she dare do that? She's an evil woman because she's a woman. But it was just fun. That was just Jane being Jane.
What people think she acted in.
Yes, and she did, but it wasn't malicious.
Yeah, how can you get knocked out by being hit in the throat? Yeah. Okay, yeah. And the fact that she called out as well, like the way people described it when I heard about it on the later shows, it sounded like she was hit in the head and then she just went glonk and went knocked out. And that's like if she had actually gone like limp and fell from being hit in the head, then I would have believed it. But yeah, I see what you're saying.
But for me, though, that was just another funny Jane moment. It was just another example that sort of Nikki's mum sort of character archetype people tried to paint her as.
Well, if it was legit, it was hilarious. If it was not legit, then it was I good actor, I guess.
We sort of mentioned before how the production team likes to try and avoid maybe sort of the cliche tasks that they have done the last couple of years. One thing they didn't do, however, was inviting ex-housemates into the house, and this brings us on to the courtroom.
Yeah, we've already had the outside contact from the outside world. Now let's come and get every information about what the public think or what they think now that they've seen their nominations. And it always makes for, as with the every single task is an excuse to get them bitching, because they're not fighting this week, this today. So we're gonna do a task that tells them that what they've said about each other in diary rooms, and we'll get them fighting. Like, as much as it was another one of them for just cheap drama, it was fun enough, I guess.
I've never been a big lover of those sort of tasks. I specifically remember in Big Brother 15 there was something similar where there was the Helen versus Ashley thing and the ramifications that had on this series. And you could especially argue as well with Charlie's involvement in there that it played a part in maybe Jason winning the show.
Yeah, give him that extra little kick of sympathy, didn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Because just when you were thinking, yeah, maybe he is a game player, then bloody Hellbeast 2.0 comes raging in.
Oh,
Yeah.
she's not as bad as Hellbeast.
No. I just mean it figuratively, of course, but no, came,
Syphilis isn't as bad as Hellbeast.
yeah, she came in like a bat out of hell because he nominated her, I think. Okay.
So of course that all leads us on to the next eviction, and of course thanks to the host Sam saving the place, it's Andy, Laura, Jason, and Jackson who end up being up for the public vote, and of course being the female, it's Laura who ends up going that week.
Yeah, and I haven't really spoke about Laura other than what she did in the first week, but as a person, I genuinely started to quite like her. I thought she was up for every task. She had a bit of a bitch and a moan with Evelyn occasionally, but I actually quite liked like they were likable for the most part, and I feel like by the end she was being tainted with the slut brush, and it was a bit of shaming by that point because you know what, Marco was in the wrong. She went for it. She wants to be promiscuous. I keep trying to use big words and then not being able to say them. Promiscuous. So whatever. It's like it's her life, it's her body. She can do whatever she wants with it, and she was, for the most part, a pleasant person in there. So
And I think as well the way she grew from being a generic first boot, because how many times have we seen a Laura end up going in week one, and then to grow and evolve and mature and really win over a lot of people. I mean, of the people who were nominated that week, he was the right choice. Because, I mean, realistically, Jackson wasn't going to go that week. He would have been my first choice. But between the other three, definitely. I was actually a little bit surprised they didn't make this one a double. Because I think that, especially Jackson versus Jason, for the second evictee would have been a very, very close vote.
yeah, and then you wouldn't have had to do the oh shit, we need to take two more out randomly in the middle of the week.
Mind you, that worked out well as well.
Do you remember when they had the money to have like a full eviction for those things?
I remember some of the old school eviction shows where they would actually have a countdown clock towards the actual eviction reveal.
Yeah, and they'd actually have a whole crowd out there because the show was popular.
Yeah, we can't even afford a bits anymore.
Couldn't afford the bus that the first move from 2009 went on.
So, of course, Laura ends up going, and now we are on to the final week. Now, because of a culmination of the courtroom task and everything that's been said and done about him, this is the week that really Jason ends up losing it.
Look, he was a game player, wasn't he?
Oh, he was a game player.
But, there's only so much of over hyperbolic nonsense that you can hear from people. And yes, he did at the end up having kind of some anger management, like he just went a little too far with his rage. But on some level, I can understand it because
Well,
if everybody's coming in and yelling at you that this terrible person and all you've done is played the game that you came here to play.
I mean, Jason did play up for sympathy, and he was a game player in that regard. But I certainly didn't think that he went into the diary room to say, "I'm going to smash up this door because that's going to win over the public."
No, he
You just
wasn't.
don't do that.
And he wasn't Andrew. He didn't go in there with a game plan. Well, he did, but he went in there with a game plan of, oh, I'll be the nice guy and see how far it gets me.
Yes. Especially if you watched him when he was having discussions with Charlie, he was very, very careful about the types of words he chose.
Yeah, because he's media savvy and he knows what happens to people who say the wrong things on these shows. He didn't want to become Dale.
So now we move on to the carnival task. Now, I always love these sort of light-hearted tasks, and I know they sort of painted it a bit more aggressively by saying this person's the most popular housemate, this person's the most memorable housemate, and I didn't like that part of it. But it was presented very well. It was presented in a fun way, and even Jason himself, considering all the cynicism he'd been getting, he even played along with it.
Yeah, it was fun. It's always those nice penultimate things that they do just to kind of let them watch how ridiculous they've been.
Yeah. I never got how Jackson was the most memorable housemate though.
Yeah, what? Who voted for that?
It was the iPhone app, which should tell you everything.
Yeah, because half of these votes I don't even know exist, and until I get the results on, yeah, the only votes that are ever really pushed are the evict ones because they can make lots of money out of those ones. The other votes I don't even know are happening. So yeah, it must be people who are actually on the app more than just to see what's there if they miss an episode or whatever. Um, the problem with these awards always is that they've always got to pick somebody that's left in the house. And if somebody who's the rightful winner of the award isn't in the house anymore, it's like, yeah, it should have been that person, but they're not here anymore to get the award. So,
And I think as well that sort of played on Jackson's mind a lot during the later stages of the show. I think he started to believe that he could win it, and I think especially a lot of the changes in his behaviour. I specifically remember the day before the final, him in the diary room, and he goes on this full-on diatribe about how he's doing it for his kid, and this has been such a humbling experience for him. He really started to play up the sympathy card during those later days.
what? Yeah, why was he the most memorable? I don't. Yeah, I can't get my head around that
As I
one.
said, I think Georgina was the only one who voted.
Yeah,
And of course, from that fortune teller task, we end up getting Alex and Sam, and they end up being called to Zoltar. Was there any sort of trademark about that? Of course, I remember Zoltar from Big. Was there any sort of reference to that at all in the show?
I don't think there is a trademark on that one. I think it's a public domain.
Well, there you go. You learn something new every day. Well, of course, they end up being called to Zoltar, and Zoltar tells them, Alex and Sam, you have been voted the most forgettable housemates, and as a result, you have been evicted. Once again, the house goes up in uproar. There's lots of hysterical tears, lots of crying, lots of shocked gasps. I do feel they really missed a trick, though, because how great would it have been? You have been evicted, and there's two chairs to sit again. Just for
Yeah, that's what I was just thinking as well. Yeah, that would have made it that much better. If like the doors had shut in front of them or something. Like, yeah,
or
absolutely.
maybe the chair tips back.
Yeah, like the ones they had for the 4 in 4 out thing where they turned around. Yeah, like they thought they were doing like a trick, and the doors goes like, ha, they're gonna turn into something, and then they just don't come back. Yeah, and that would have
Yeah,
been.
missed a big opportunity there.
But that
Um,
would have cost money, and at that point they just wanted those fuckers out the house so they could put the celebrities in.
yeah, celebrities in inverted commas.
Mm-hmm.
Heavy D is not a celebrity.
No,
Frankie Grande
none of them
is
are
not a
none of them are
celebrity.
celebrities. They're people off other reality shows. But that's a thing for another show.
Yeah, but
Marco's more of a celebrity than most of them.
we'll discuss that in a lot more detail because now we are going to be discussing Alex and Sam.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on to the final. No, I'm kidding.
They were
Sam,
fine. Alex thought he could win just because he was good looking and stayed away from the relationship with Evelyn because he knew that it would harm his chances. Sam, his only storyline was with Ryan. After that resolved, he was a decent enough guy, but other than that, was just Letitia's sidekick. And after she left, he was nothing.
I have a little bit more sympathy for Sam than maybe some other people do. I
Yeah, I
think
liked
that
him. He
yeah,
was a nice
he
guy.
was a decent enough bloke, but he wasn't good television. I think maybe what's happened is that obviously because they had the twist with a lot of people knowing each other from before the show, I can imagine Ryan had been cast, and then they found someone from Ryan's past to utilize for it, and that's how Sam got on.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't
Then
think
why was he the one in the main house?
I think maybe just to shake it up. I think that they would have used. I think Ryan's reaction towards Sam being there would have been a lot more extreme than
I'll be
what.
honest with that one as well about the beginning was I think they put the wrong people in the wrong houses. I think some of the people in the main house would have done a better job of what the other house people were supposed to do.
Yeah, I agree with that. Personally, I would have loved to have seen Jane there rather than Chelsea. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I
I
personally
think Chelsea would have played the others' game much better. I think Sam would have played it better than Ryan. Hell, I think Jason would have played it better than Charlie.
that one I'm a little bit unsure about. Personally, I think that I think Charlie played that side of it quite well, in my opinion.
Hmm. Yeah, well, at least she tried, unlike
Yeah.
Ryan.
And this brings us on to Alex. Now, the Big Brother pretty boy archetype has been in the show since the very beginning. Even when you had Tom McDermott in Big Brother 1 walking around with his shirt off, it's always been there. And especially because it attracts a young audience, it's particularly evident. Of all these pretty boys, however, Alex is the one that annoys me the most because that's all he was. There wasn't any showmans, there wasn't any sort of quirks, there wasn't any sort of funny behaviour. He just sat around with his shirt off and had this entitled belief that because he did that, he was justified a place in the final. And to see him basically being told, you were utterly terrible, you don't deserve it, I found that very satisfying to see him miss the final.
Hmm. I was worried he was going to win at one point, to be honest.
Oh, I did as well, especially during the early stages of the show. I mean, he was still polling something like 3 or 4%, even in the early stages, but the bookie still had him as the favourite to win, simply because he was a pretty boy.
It's
And
a
I think
case. It's one of those cases of, do you reward somebody by winning the show because they were a nice person, or do you reward them for being a good entertainment part of the show? The problem is with Alex that I found was he was way too savvy to what he knew people would like and what he knew people wouldn't like. He knew that people would like him being the pretty boy lad. He knew that people would like him being the nice person. He knew that people would not like him being a showman, so he avoided that at all costs. He stayed away from her like poison unless he was drunk.
Well, he sort of teased it a little bit with Evelyn.
That's what I'm saying. There was a case there where I think his thing of, which was really bizarre, where he was asking people, is she a keeper or whatever the fuck. I think that was him saying, should I have this showmance to help my chance in this house? That was him talking to himself almost, and he pretty much always said no to himself because he decided that would help him, and it didn't. And maybe after he got kicked out, it's like, damn it, maybe I should have had that showmance.
He really couldn't get over why he'd been evicted. I remember that moment with him and Sam in the diary room where they're doing the epilogue, and he was just puzzled as to why he'd been evicted.
Because they were both nice guys in the house who weren't dicks, and in a vote to evict, those are the guys that stay. In a vote to save, they're the guys that go.
So there's hope for us to get rid of Bear then.
Oh, that nice guy. Yes.
Yes, wonderful guy, that Stephen Bear.
He's gonna get votes. I'm telling you.
He's gonna win.
He's not gonna win.
If Jim Davidson and Helen Wood can win, so can Bear.
Jim Davidson was not a bad winner, but no. The thing with him is, it's like take Mark, but take out any kind of likability.
Well, thankfully, though, we can move away from talking about Sam and Alex. It is now finale night, which took place on a Tuesday. That's one of the big things that really bothers me about
That was
Channel
one
5.
of the big. It was one of the big ones of, we can't be fucked with this thing. Just get them out and get the celebrities in. The entire last 2 weeks just felt like, hurry up and get these nobodies out.
But how many times, especially in the Channel 4 series, was there that big build up towards finale night? You could actually see the stage being built especially for it, and housemates watching it from the garden and thinking, oh my god, it's getting so close. The final is such an afterthought now. I mean, did we even have fireworks this year?
We had sparklers.
Sparklers. We had sparklers, but it's such a shame as well, and especially for such a good series. I think 6 is too many for a final, but we'll discuss that in a bit more detail.
Yeah, no, I know. Definitely that's how it's been for the past couple of years. Hurry up and get them out. We want the celebrities in.
Yeah. So finale night starts. 5th and 6th place both leave together. It caught a lot of people by surprise that Jane was the first person out on the finale night.
She'd lost a bit of steam. She hadn't had a good rant in a while. People had forgot why they liked her, and they'd already jumped on the let's vote for Jason just to fuck with Letitia's clique.
You would have expected her to beat Evelyn, though. I mean, Evelyn, she did start to come out of the shell a little bit, and especially remember when I think she was quizzing Jackson after the money situation, and that was when I really started to like her. But I felt over the course of the series she didn't do enough to justify finishing ahead of Jane, who I felt was one of the stars of the season.
She's one of those people who you'd love, like her, Alex, and Sam are the type of housemates you'd actually want to be in the house with, but they're not as much fun to watch all the time.
But this is our opportunity to talk about Jane, and you have to make the argument she was the star of the series.
She was certainly one of the most memorable, yeah. She'll just be remembered for me for some of the outlandish comments she'd be said in the diary room and some of the ridiculous things about sleep and tea and being on drugs and Natalie and yeah.
I thought she was so likable. She was sweet, she was endearing, she was very funny in the diary room. Yes, you can maybe say question marks over whether or not she hammed up a little bit, but there was no malice in it. There was no, I'm going to do this to try and win over the public. It was
I quite liked it. It was nice to have an older woman with some support behind her. Because usually the women over 30, they're like, oh, get them out, they're not entertaining. Yeah.
Actually, I'm thinking about this. Is Jane the first female over 30 to actually make it to a final?
I don't know whether she's first to make it up. No, because Erika Johnson won.
Well, yeah, excluding the celebrity version.
Probably.
And personally as well, I think for a woman who was 50, I thought she was a very, very good-looking woman.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And from one good-looking woman to go to another, which is Evelyn. Evelyn took a long time to really come out of her shell. I think that really over the course of the first 2 weeks, she was definitely the forgotten housemaid. There was a lot of "Who's Evelyn" jokes going around Digital Spy. But as I mentioned before, once the Jackson stuff happened, and once a lot of the bigger characters started leaving the house, she started to come out of her shell. She started to embrace the show a lot more, and I found her really likable. Maybe not enough to be the top female.
No. Her and Laura both, I think, for me, are they were likable people, but they also had a personality, and they also
Yes.
had moments where they came out of their shell and did things, but just not enough.
She's an archetypal example of a first out on launch night, and I think that's why a lot of people were surprised. We've seen people like, I think Jenny Corn is the first name that comes to my mind, of nice, sweet, endearing girl, just didn't do enough and leaves first. And Evelyn wasn't.
Yeah. That's the problem with we said the first eviction about Marco. It's kind of like the double-edged sword. It's like, would Marco become so poisonous that we would have just despised him, or would he have kept the show being entertaining? If it, what you've kind of got the toss-up there. Evelyn, if she had gone, maybe the show would have been more entertaining. But with Marco gone and with Evelyn staying, we probably got a much more person we actually wanted to watch without it just being wanting to hate.
Well, the big one that really comes to mind for me in regards to the whole what if thing is the Bonnie versus Glyn vote. Well, of course, Glyn came very, very close to going in Big Brother 7 first week. And of course, he ends up being one of the big stars of the show.
Yeah, exactly. So it's one of those ones where sometimes if you give people time, eventually they'll show you something, especially after the bigger, louder characters go.
So we are now down to the final four, and it's guaranteed it's going to be a male that's going to be the winner. Andy ends up going fourth, which maybe there were a lot of people that were on the forums that were maybe a bit surprised by this vote. Personally, I think he went around about the right time. Andy is very much that sort of fourth place type character, but he's someone as well who I quite liked. And I know I've always supported the more intelligent housemates, maybe those who are arguably a bit too good for the show, as it were. I quite liked Andy, and I know that's maybe an unpopular opinion, but I'm entitled.
Yeah. I mean, I enjoyed him half the time. My thing with him was he was Chris, but a less likable version of
Yes.
Chris. More patronising, more up himself version of Chris, which is where he fell down, I think. And especially since a majority of the people who vote on this show are working class people, I think they will definitely have felt talked down to by him.
And I think as well he was also hurt by the fact that Jason was in there. And I think him and Jason shared a similar sort of fan base. And I think that played a part in Jason eventually winning the show, but why a lot of people maybe distanced themselves from Andy.
Well, yeah, he should have got himself more disliked.
Yes. I did like Andy though. I think he served a great role as the house narrator. But as you mentioned before, I understand as well a lot of the reasons why people did dislike him. He was very condescending. He did look down on his nose on a lot of people. He wasn't as funny as maybe he should have been. I think what a lot of people forget as well with Andy is that he was a very prominent figure within the BBC News setup, and what he's done since leaving the show is he's done a lot of promotion for Big Brother. He's been on the Jeremy Vine show. He works as a producer for Jeremy, so he used those sort of connections. But he's spoken openly about the show. He's been quite positive about it. So in that regard, I have a lot of time for him.
Yeah, it wasn't just a paycheck to him, which is nice.
No, I mean it was a gimmick why he was cast for the show in the first place, but he capitalised on it, and he justified his place in the.
Because he knew he was never going to have another moment in the spotlight without it.
No.
His story was done. Yeah.
So thank you, Tyson Fury.
Yeah.
So now we come to the final three. Now this is where a lot of people are starting to get very, very nervous. Not so much because of Jason winning or Huey winning, it's Jackson. Jackson is, by this point, the least popular contestant within the Big Brother community. And there's a lot of people, especially when he started playing the sympathy card, really started to worry that he was going to win. So
See,
it released a lot.
My week that I turned on him, as I discussed earlier, was the week where he took the money, and then he started at first yelling at everybody and being a dick about it, and then afterwards started crying, going, "Oh, I shouldn't have taken it. I would have given it. I'm going to give it to you all." That's when I turned on him.
I mean, a lot of people criticize Jason for being a game player, quite rightly so, but Jackson was just as bad.
Yeah, he. I don't know, because at the same time, it's like, did he have enough brain cells to work out a game plan? Or did he just do it because he was like, oh, this will make me look good, and that's all he kind of knew?
Yeah, well, that to me is a game plan.
True.
For me, with Jackson, is I mentioned this before earlier on in the show. People had this idea of what Dappy was going to be like in Celebrity Big Brother 13, and to his credit, Dappy actually turned out to be decent enough. Obviously, he finished as a runner-up. Jackson, for me, was what people expected Dappy to be like. Playing to the cameras, believing his own hype, a lot of cringe-worthy behaviour as well.
Mm,
He wasn't likable, and I think by the end of the series, he was, for a lot of people, the worst character in the show.
Big question: are they together?
I honestly don't know. Obviously, Big Brother, Celebrity Big Brother 18 almost immediately happened afterwards. Any sort of like pre-story stuff since then, I've sort of phased out of, to be honest.
I've heard rumours about Jeremy and what's her face, Stephanie from the last series. That they apparently she's pregnant with his kid now.
Stephanie Davis is pregnant with everybody, to be honest. She does the rounds on the magazines every week.
Okay, right, it was one of those. Okay.
Yeah. Maybe she is. Maybe she is. Well, I hope so, because we were very supportive of that relationship.
Yeah. Well. Yeah.
I've still got hopes for Kamal and Kinga.
It's crazy, isn't it, that Grace and Mikey are the only relationship that ever actually worked on the show?
I think they've had 2 kids as well, and they're still together.
Oh yeah, they're married. Yeah, that was an actual real thing. It's hilarious. I've said this in the past. It's hilarious that the relationships that are like the ones that people like or people enjoy on the show are the ones that never last, because it's usually it becomes after they come out, whether it was intended to be in the first place. After they come out, it becomes all about the magazine covers and
Because I think Aaron and Faye broke up recently as well.
yeah. Well, at least they stayed together for
They
years.
did, 3, 4 years.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, the least popular couples stay together because they don't get the magazine deals, because they actually get to have a relationship instead of being in a public relationship. You know,
Agreed. Agreed. What was your opinion of Jackson?
he early on he was harmless. Then I just really started to dislike him. The hypocritical behaviour, the wet sponge. I felt pity for him at that point, but then he became just again this entitlement of I'm the man of the house, and you should all be my friends. And if you're not my friend, no matter what I do, I'm always in the right. And yeah, just any of those kind of people just automatically make me go, yeah, just no.
So now we come to the final two. It's Huey versus Jason. Apparently a very close vote if you believe Emma. Do you actually believe Emma when she actually mentions that there's less than 1% in it?
Um, if I do, then sure. But if I don't, then I think it's production saying say it so that more people vote.
Because part of me does believe that Huey maybe did lead the vote and then Jason did take over, but I certainly don't think it was over the course of the night, and I certainly don't think it was like a less than
I think
1%.
it was. I think it was pretty close, but of course
I
we'll
think it
never
was
know.
close.
We'll never know because they don't release the voting figures anymore, do they?
No, the only time they did was when You Know Who won, and they needed to release it to
Prove that
ward
she
off the
won.
conspiracy theories.
Mm. Why is it that they don't now? Why is it that for the Channel 4 production had to, but Channel 5 doesn't?
I think it's just personal choice, in my opinion.
But what the old show used to be much more transparent.
Yes, and I think because even with Strictly Come Dancing, they don't release the percentage figures on Strictly either.
Mm.
So
Mm.
I think it's just personal choice in that regard. Personally, I want to see it because I want to see how close or how dramatic
But it's
those.
another one of those things of you're feeding the conspiracy theorists at that point of, because we only get the highlight show and maybe a half hour of live feed every week, they could be doing anything when those cameras are off and directing them to do anything, and that's how the conspiracy theories start. And the reason that we believed more of the old days was because they were more transparent. Yeah,
Totally agree. So Huey versus Jason is the final two. Huey has been the massive odds-on favourite throughout the last couple of weeks. It's almost a given he's going to win the series. And then Jason's announced as the winner.
Yeah, it was a double-edged sword. In terms of the money, if he really is as rich as people say he is, he didn't need the money. But at the same time, I thought it was hilarious and good because I didn't want Huey to win because I never want somebody to win to be rewarded for bad behaviour.
Would you really say Huey's behaviour was bad? I mean, yeah, he
The
played up.
the argument when he was yelling at Sam, yeah,
Yeah, I'll give you that. And that was one of the few negative moments he had. I mean, Huey wasn't necessarily one of my favourites. He was sort of around my top five, top six, etc. But I did understand why people did like him. I did find a lot of his rants funny. I did think that he seemed a decent enough bloke when he wasn't played up to the cameras. I just felt it was just a bit of a lazy choice for Huey to win.
yeah, yeah.
It's just a bit generic. We'd seen it all before when Brian Dowling was on his series.
He was nowhere near as likable as Brian Dowling.
Oh, definitely not.
Yeah, I don't know. There was just too much fakeness there, too much media awareness for my taste.
Someone said it perfectly on one of the forums. I think it might have been Survivor Sucks. He reminded me a lot of Rodrigo. Whether it was because of the fact he had the relationship with Ryan and he reminded
Mm,
me of Charlie Drummond, maybe it was the
yeah,
tantrums.
but then Rodrigo was more. I felt more adorable because maybe it was because he was younger, and it just felt more genuine from him. Whereas Huey felt like it was forced.
Given the choice though between Jason and Huey, who would you have preferred?
I see. It's a very hard series to pick a winner for me because I never really had a favorite throughout the series. It was like I tuned in to watch a car crash, and that's kind of how it's become lately for me. If we're gonna get this out, if the choices are people who are so media savvy that they do nothing because they don't want to destroy their careers, and people who are so outrageous that they're just basically begging for airtime and doing everything they can to get airtime, I'm just going to tune in and kind of watch it as a car crash TV, and I never really like anybody. Um, but of the people who were there in the final, I would have liked Jane to win.
Oh yes, definitely.
But of those two, Jason, just because I wanted a kick in the complacency again of that Alex and Letitia click.
Huey just would have been another generic type of winner. He would have been another Josie. He would have been another Sophie Reed type. And I just felt it was a bit of a refreshing change to have someone like Jason win. It's very similar to the reason why I was so supportive of Aaron in Big Brother 12. I understand why people don't like Jason, and there's a lot of character traits I didn't like either.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not a big fan of Jason. I just liked how it kicked all those people who were like, yes, Huey's going to win. Huey's definitely going to win. I loved that it kicked their complacency of that.
I think there was a lot of people out there, and whether or not they were bitter or not because they wanted Chewie to win and they didn't like Jason, etc. I mean, there were people out there painting him as this sort of Sam Evans figure who ended up completely spoiling the show by winning. People forget though, Jason was part of one of the big storylines at the early stages of the show with him and Charlie.
Mm.
Um,
Well, I'd say the middle portion. The early
yeah,
stage, he wasn't really a character at all. The
but it was still always this
first
underlying
week or
arc,
so,
wasn't
he was
it?
non. Until Charlie went in there, he was non-existent.
Of course, in the middle stages of the show, there was the stuff between him and Charlie, which we discussed ad nauseum. There was the big controversy when he ended up evicting Letitia. Um, and you'd argue if you had to look at like the 4 or 5 biggest characters of the series, he was one of them. I remember I always do the end of year poll for who should make the DVD covers, which I always design. And Jason was third. I mean, it was like Huey and Jane, and then Jason. So it wasn't as if he just came out of nowhere to steal the win.
Yeah, I mean, rather him than Jackson, you know.
Yeah, rather syphilis than Jackson, let's be honest. So if I had to rank Jason as a sort of winner, I would probably put him around, I would say, higher middle of the pack.
Uh,
I mean, I probably rate him a bit higher than say Luke from Big Brother 13 and Chloe, etc. But he certainly isn't like at the level of say a Rachel Rice or a Brian Dowling or a Nadia, etc.
See, it's got to the point with me now that the winners, I just don't. The next year rolls around and I'm like, okay, yeah, who won last year? So I don't really care anymore about who wins because the show is at this point isn't anything, and you just like it's fun to watch, but winning it doesn't mean anything. Is what I mean. I mean, you get the money, which is nice, I suppose, of course for the person, but actually having the crown of the winner doesn't really get you anything, and the person who wins tends to just disappear and go back to their lives. And it's like there's no prestige to it anymore, so I don't really care who wins anymore.
One thing I will say about Jason, however, is that he is officially the oldest winner ever, 46 years old, and that's the oldest that it ever has been in Big Brother UK. And I think he's older than Evil Dick was when he won Big Brother 8 as well in America. And I find that really fantastic to hear, though, because I remember in Big Brother 5 when Ahmed was coming into the house, and it was this really big deal about Ahmed is the oldest housemate ever. He's 44.
Yeah,
And now
yeah,
we've got a 46-year-old winning, so I do like that part.
yeah. Cool.
But this is our opportunity to talk about Big Brother 17 in general. Yeah, maybe the production team weren't as fantastic about it as what we were. Personally, I liked the series, and I think part of the reason why I liked it was it wasn't as overtly negative as it had been in, say, a Big Brother 15 or a 16, etc. This felt fun.
Hmm. Yeah, I can moan about the production stuff. I can moan about the casting. I can moan about how some of it was structured. But at the end of the day, I was thoroughly entertained throughout this entire series, and there was something that was, even though it was so blatantly media savvily cast, there was something production-wise that was a little more genuine about it.
Yes.
It didn't feel so forced as the last couple of years have been.
And I think the housemates helped as well. I
Hmm.
don't think they were as overtly negative as what they had been in recent years.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
I mean, obviously, you did have bad people, but if Jackson's.
There was not one person this year. I could say whatever I want about whoever, but there was not one person this year that was actually a terrible person.
No. If Jack.
There were people who were misguided, or people who, like Marco, really need a fucking kick up the arse and a life lesson.
Yeah.
But there was nobody that was overtly just a malicious person.
If Jackson's the worst housemate this year, then you know you had a good series.
As a person, I'd say Marco was the worst person, but yeah.
Yeah.
Not the worst housemate, but the worst person.
So I'm afraid that's all we got time for. Big Brother's Big Archive have discussed Big Brother 17. We consider it a fantastic series. As I said before, I have to apologise that it's taken so long for us to actually get round to recording this one. But I thoroughly enjoyed it. I hope we can continue to make other shows. I'm not going to promise which episode's next because we've been promising to do Celebrity Hijack.
It'll be celebrity, won't it? It'll be this series.
It will be, yeah. But I don't think we're going to have the time to do Celebrity Hijack, but we've been promising that one since about 94.
Definitely.
So until the next time you do hear from us, this has been Big Brother's Big Archive. My name's been Karl Bainbridge. That's been Karl Dutton.
See you next time.
And we hope to hear from you again soon. Bye bye for now.